starting right now.
Madam Clerk, would you do the roll call?
Director Arthur Perry.
Here.
Director Michael Schaefer.
Here.
Secretary Arlene Schaefer.
Here.
Vice President Robert Ung.
Here. Do we do the pledge at this meeting?
Yes.
No, we don't. No. No, we don't. We don't.
We can do part of the pledge for the director.
You're in charge. You do whatever you want.
The first item on the agenda, are there any people in the public that want to make comments, and this is the time set aside for that? There'll probably be some comments. Yeah, we have one person who wants to do a comment on a particular item, E5. We'll get to that. The first item on the study session is contribution of $50,000 to the city of Costa Mesa for restrooms at the portable bridge shelter, and I believe potential contributions beyond that. Does any of the public want to speak to that item?
You want me to give a staff report first on that?
Staff
Give an report on that.
first, Bob.
Start with staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So, as you know, the city of Costa Mesa has been working tirelessly to find shelters for the homeless population, and as you probably read in the paper, the good news is we believe there's light in the tunnel. They successfully found a temporary bridge shelter at the Lighthouse Church on Anaheim Avenue, which is supposed to open next month. They've entered a contract with Mercy House to operate the temporary shelter as well as the permanent shelter, which, as you probably read in the paper, the city council has agreed to purchase the warehouse just a few blocks from here on Airway, 3175 Airway, as a permanent shelter. As you know, this board has taken a very proactive position on homelessness in the community and actively wanted to be a partner in believing that the city should not address this issue alone. It should be a collaborative effort with all the partners in the community. And just historically, what this organization has done to assist the city in homelessness, as you know, we participate in the Network for Homeless Solutions Committee. We make available our SHARP containers for residents and for city officials. They could drop those off here at HQ. We've made our newsletter available to the Network for Homeless Committee to give information out to the public of all the success that committee and the city has done in the past few years. And also our code enforcement officer, he is trained in identifying individuals that might need assistance. So when he comes across someone that's scavenging recyclables and he believes that they might need assistance, he'll refer them to the city of Costa Mesa. And then most recently, as you know, we've entered an agreement with Second Chance Orange County, which they are renting a couple offices here at HQ, and they are assisting people get back on their feet and finding good paying jobs so they can not be homeless. Recently, the city officials have contacted us and requested the district contribute $50,000 for portable restrooms at the temporary bridge shelter. The city plans on acquiring 6 toilets. So that fee, that contribution, $50,000, will pay for renting those restrooms, the toilets, as well as maintenance operations such as emptying the waste tank, making sure that it's clean, stocked, and also monitoring the restrooms, which will be available 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They've also requested the district do ongoing contributions to the permanent shelters on Airway Avenue. That one will have indoor restrooms, indoor plumbing. Staff believes that the district, as you know, when we make contributions, you have to identify a purpose and how it's moving that purpose. We believe the portable restrooms at the temporary bridge shelter will definitely meet that purpose. It's very similar to what we were presenting about a year and a half ago, but portable restrooms on trailers. So we believe that would be fine, making a contribution of $50,000 for the interim bridge shelter. The permanent shelter might be a little more of a stretch, and you'll see in the legal review the district council put in there under staff report, because it's indoor restrooms and it's indoor plumbing. We usually leave that to the property owner's responsibility. So, but it's totally up to you if you want to do that yourself as well. So that really concludes my presentation. We do have city officials here to may want to address the board, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, what is the rent expense, and how long is the rent expense for?
Well, I don't know the exact rent, but the contribution will be for the entire year. For the entire year.
Is that what? Can I ask a question of the public? John, when do you expect the new facility to be available?
Approximately 1 year. So we paid $280,000 in rent. $140,000 of that is going to go toward the infrastructure improvements that we're making to facilitate the shelter, and the rest of it's going to go to other infrastructure improvements at the Lighthouse Church. That gives us actually a long term there, but we're planning to have the shelter there with all the modulars and the restrooms for approximately a year. That's how long it's going to take us to purchase and build out the permanent shelter.
Thank you. Then my second question, Scott, is does that $50,000 cover the maintenance costs also?
Yes, it does.
For the whole year?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my two questions.
Scott, I'm a little skittish on this matter for a couple of reasons. Last time we proposed something like this, we were chastised pretty heavily by a member of the city council, and so that's still in my thought process. The $25,000 that we had allocated previously for the portable, that we had offered previously, where was that money coming from, and where did it end up?
Well, let me address the first concern you have about the portable restrooms that we were proposing. I believe the reason why the community was concerned is because they thought we were going to place those toilets, the restrooms, in the neighborhood.
I understand.
And so there was some misinformation why that was out there. As far as the money goes, as you might recall, we presented this back on November 30th, 2017. The proposal was a 6-month pilot program that was going to cost $43,000, and we were going to split that cost if the city agreed with that 50-50. So our contribution would be $21,500, and if the program was successful, then the purchase of permanent unit and along with maintenance would have cost us $65,000 a year, and we would have split that cost about $32,500. So you're looking about $54,000 possible for the year. That money was coming from the wastewater fund.
Okay, so that's what I was looking for, was the fact that this has always been out of the wastewater fund, nothing to do with the solid waste fund.
Correct.
Which we're looking at some rate changes, and
Yeah,
I don't want to mess around with that.
Correct. The proposed solid waste rate increase that you'll be considering later this morning has nothing to do with the restrooms.
Okay. But the $25,000 that was earmarked for us to contribute for the prior program, the prior trial program, that money has been reallocated, or is it still in the wastewater fund?
No, we put it back. We just put that back in the fund reserves.
Because in your report you mentioned obviously that we're not budgeted for the $50,000.
Correct.
The other question I had, Mr. Vice President, was that this agenda item is being presented to us as an item of study, but yet you're asking us to take an action this morning?
Yes, I am, because the shelter is going to be open next month, and so the city would like to have that money as soon as possible so they can start acquiring the restrooms and get it out on the property.
So, Colin, are we okay taking an action this morning on this? Is that?
There's nothing. This is a regular board meeting. There's always been a policy, this board, to not take board action in the study session, but that's just a policy. There's nothing that says you can't. This is a regular board meeting. You can take action today.
Actually, in emergencies, we can do
Right.
I understand that, but I just want to make sure that we're not crossing some lines we don't want to. Colin?
The agenda language actually says consider contributing $50,000. So it's for the Brown Act purposes, we've actually agendized an action. So the board does have authority under the agenda to take action if it wants to.
Yeah, I had two thoughts. One is on the 15,000. Is that just for the year and then they come back again to us?
No, that the 50,000 is just for the $50,000 is for 1 year. If by chance the interim shelter is still operational another year, they may come back. But I believe they're planning that the permanent shelter will be available within the year.
The other thing is I'd like somebody to talk from the city as far as just saying anything that you feel present to us that maybe we left out. Is there anyone that wants
Well,
us?
let's finish our discussion. Oh, that's okay. I hear you. But
I'm okay. I'm okay.
what's the 25,000 budgeted at one time for the pilot program?
No, it wasn't. It was not. It came out of reserves, fund balance.
Oh, I did it, Bob. I'm sorry. We're being asked for $50,000. When we had originally done the pilot program for the portable restrooms, we had asked Mesa Water to participate in that.
Yes.
Do you know if Mesa Water's been invited to participate in this program or not?
Yeah, I believe they have been because they plan on putting showers at the interim shelter, so they've requested $50,000 from Mesa Water as well.
Who?
Mesa Water.
Mesa Water. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Bob.
Any more discussion from the board?
I think, when we, the first go around, I think it was more like in the $160,000 range, wasn't it?
I remember a higher number the first time that we had discussed,
Yes.
at least here.
Yes. I don't remember that talk. I'm looking at a staff report. We did it back on November 30th. That's where I got the numbers. Originally it might have been up to $100,000, but after we did some more research, I think we fine-tuned those numbers.
Are we okay to be doing this? I mean, we're not violating any?
You just missed that
Did I?
discussion.
I'm sorry. Okay. Did somebody have something? Okay.
We haven't heard from the city.
Huh?
We haven't heard from the city. If they have something.
Oh, John.
Yeah, sure. So I can answer any questions. We've got Justin Martin here. He's the spearheading this whole project for the city. He's doing a terrific job. And our acting city manager, Tammy Letourneau. Thank you for considering this. To Director Schaefer's comment, I hear you, right? But it's a new world at City Hall, and it's a new world for some very, elections matter. And we now have a new city council. 7 of us are together, and we are together on this. And we appreciate that you've considered this. And, when you look at kind of why we're doing it, we've been, during the election, we identified a lot of issues that matter to our community. We recently even did a survey because, we're looking for a new city manager. And we did a survey and we asked people to come back with not only what they want in a city manager, but what are the most important issues in the city. There were 193 responses, and overwhelmingly, the most important issue was homelessness. We heard that during the election. I mean, some of you ran, and you probably walked precincts and talked to folks about it. During the election, homelessness is the most important issue. And then we also had something that is really beyond our city, and that is of course, we were involved in the lawsuit, and we just settled the lawsuit before Judge Carter. But the Ninth Circuit came out with the City of Boise case. And that case held that if you do not have shelters, you cannot enforce your anti-encampment ordinances. So what we and all the other cities in the western United States are facing is, if you don't have a shelter, you have encampments. If you have encampments, you have certain circumstances like we saw at the Anaheim River Trail, at the Santa Ana Civic Center, where you have people living together in very unsanitary conditions and dangerous conditions. There's a lot of abuse and just human suffering that goes on in encampments. So we were taking this action before the City of Boise case came out. We were involved in the lawsuit and we were looking into this. But that really accelerated our need to have a shelter. Then we we come back to you folks and we ask you to contribute. And as I think Scott said, and it's true, this isn't just an issue that involves the city. It's an issue that involves the entire community. And our districts, our school district, our water district, and our sanitary district. And we tried, remember last year, to address the one issue in a very small and modest way to get it was not a portable restrooms for the homeless necessarily. The goal was to have a clean, hygienic restroom somewhere in Costa Mesa. The pilot project was just to determine where and how to do it. Well, that didn't go too well with that council, but as I said, it's a new day. We have new priorities. This is the highest priority of the city. Folks in City Hall are working across departments just overtime every single day to address this. This shelter will be ready to go on April 1st. People will move in on April 5th. And I'm told that there's already 35 people ready to go to move into the shelter. And I'll tell you one last thing. I'll leave you with one last thing, is thank you for your participation in the Network for Homeless Solutions, which we've been doing since 2011. And we've been putting a lot of resources. Your district, our city, and also a lot of nonprofits in the community have worked together. And I just learned a statistic that through those efforts since 2011, 400 people have been lifted out of homelessness. But here's the catch. 80% of them were housed outside of the city of Costa Mesa. So without a shelter, without this focus on housing and the Housing First model and housing people in Costa Mesa, we're basically exporting our homeless to other cities, and that's not acceptable. So we're moving forward. Andrea Marr says we're moving like a freight train. This is going to happen, and quite honestly, with or without your help. But we ask for your help, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate all the stuff that you've done so far with the Network for Homeless Solutions. If you have any questions, I'm here, Justin's here, and Tammy's here. Yes, sir.
John, is the strategic planning around the temporary and then the permanent shelter, is it envisioned that the temporary shelter will still be used after the permanent shelter is in
Yes.
place?
So here's the interesting part. So our lease with the Lighthouse Church goes until 2026. When we move out and we no longer have a shelter there, that'll still be a place where people can go for intake. So we'll have the shelter is a reservation or referral only shelter, but there will be places throughout the city where we do intake, and we will have a small, I think it's 200 square foot office there until 2026 based on our lease.
The city presently spends about $1 million a year on the homelessness issue, maybe more. Once the temporary and permanent shelter are in place, does the city envision any of those costs to be reduced?
No, because as a matter of fact, they'll even be increased. Because what will happen is we call it kind of the hybrid model, and this is why I think we can have the very best shelter, really a model shelter for the state of California, the United States, and maybe the world, is because we have had in place this group, this outreach group that includes social workers, code enforcement folks, Mike Brumbaugh, Stacy Lumley, Muriel Ullman, and they're going to continue to do their work. And they're going to be the outreach piece that no other city has. No other city in Orange County, at least, has developed that type of team. We also have dedicated police officers that address the homeless. They'll stay in place, and they'll be residing and working out of the shelter. In addition to that, we have Mercy House. So we're just putting more resources and becoming more professional and adding resources. But that core group is going to remain the same. Not only that, we're actually adding, I think, 2 social workers to help people, once they're housed, stay housed.
third, last question is, how will the homeless participants be selected? There are homeless all throughout the city. I think most of them around Lions Park know about, the availability of temporary shelter.
Right. Well, so this program is known as a low barrier housing first model, and what that means is, you don't have to like apply. It's not like getting into college or something like that. We know that we're going to have some very challenging folks that come into our shelter that have addiction issues, mental health issues, physical issues. They're going to come into our shelter, and that's expected. And then what's going to happen after they have some time to kind of get their bearings is we're going to immediately work on a housing first model where we try to get them into permanent housing. That's to be distinguished from what I call the transformational model, which you see at Orange County, the mission, the rescue mission, and also at places like Haven for Hope, where you have to make certain commitments to get in. You have to commit to be clean. You have to commit to a long-term program where after 6 months, a year, you've completely transformed your life. Our focus is on housing first. Art.
Do you anticipate going past 2026 at the bridge location?
Well, I don't know. We don't have any contractual right to that. I forget. Do we have any like renewal provisions in the lease? We do. Okay, so we have some renewal provisions in the lease that could take us beyond that. Yeah.
What I was thinking about, if we're renting these, we could purchase them for $25,000 each. And over a long term, it might save us some money if we go past 2026 for just a consideration down the road. But just a thought for you, Scott, when you deal with them.
But the portable restrooms, it's all part of a big modular unit. So there's portable restrooms and portable showers, all part of a larger modular unit. Once we move our shelter operation to the permanent shelter, that modular unit will go away. And then what will exist at the Lighthouse Church will be their permanent restrooms.
Not our temporary ones?
Not ours, no.
Big difference.
I apologize for being late, but I do need to know, how long of a commitment is this 50,000? Is it annual for a certain number of years, or what are you asking for?
I'll try to answer that question. So, there's two recommendations for you today to consider. The first one is approve contributing $50,000 for the interim bridge shelter. That'll be for 1 year. The second recommendation is to consider ongoing $50,000 contributions every year for the permanent shelter. And if you want that, then you need to direct us to put that in the budget, because we'll as we're doing the budget right now, we'll put it in the budget. So those are the two recommendations. The first one is just for 1 year, and that's at the interim bridge one. The second recommendation is for continual $50,000 for at least the next 2 years.
Yeah, and if I can just say something about that, because there's been some focus, I think, on our discussions about, well, we've got the portable restrooms at the Lighthouse Church, and that's kind of sort of like what we were talking about in our pilot project, and then we're going to switch to a permanent, and then the restrooms are going to be as part of the building. But I think about this as taking at least 50 people, approximately 50 people off the streets who were compromising the sanitary conditions in the city. The things that we talked about, the defecation and things when we talked about the proposal last year. So whether they're using a permanent or portable restroom or a permanent restroom, the idea is to lift people out of homelessness so they're not creating an unsanitary condition for themselves and the rest of the community.
As we go along, is 50 going to be enough? I mean, what's the population of homeless in Costa Mesa. You might have mentioned that earlier, but
The point in time count, we don't have our most recent one, but the last one that was done had it at 103, I think it was, which got us to the 60% that we were required to do by Judge Carter. That was 62. 12 beds are at College Hospital at a crisis stabilization unit, and then we backed into the 50 as the beds. That's our commitment to the court. When we get to the temporary shelter, we're going to be set up in a place that's 15,000 square feet. So it's going to be, there's going to be ample capacity. What we're planning to do right now is stick with 50 beds because it's in keeping with what our numbers are. And I'll kind of swing back to that in a second. And then have a lot of kind of services that are offered with the extra square footage. But we'll see, right? I mean, we'll see how it goes. The 60%, Judge Carter came up with that right after the City of Boise case came out, and the theory is that there's this idea about called I can't even remember the name of it. It's like virtually ending homelessness or effectively ending homelessness or something like that. Is when you provide the services for the people who are receptive to the services, and what you're left with are the folks that are resistant to the services. You've done the best you can. And so Judge Carter just used a rule of thumb of 60% of the point in time count will be receptive to the services, and that's kind of how we got to 50. And that was signed off on, by the way, by the plaintiffs' attorneys who are advocates. So it's a number we've been using in the county and in the lawsuit.
any other questions? John?
Just one, John. The Lions Park is south of the new library. It's going through a renovation. And I forget whether there were bathrooms. Bathrooms have been an issue in Lions Park because of the old model. Do you know what the new? Well, there's a plan, but the final plan has not been developed. So there will probably be more bathrooms for children and adults used in the children's area, and there will be the library.
I think they're going to be focusing on security too, down in that area. Is that right, John?
Correct. We have actually already hired security during the construction, and there'll be a lot of security, and there will obviously be restrooms in the library.
The shelter itself also has 24-hour security guards on site.
Anybody have anything else?
Is there any public?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, President Ferriman and members of the board. My name is Jim Mosier. I too saw that note from the district council in the agenda packet, and it gave me pause about both this item and the previous consideration about the portable toilets. I've heard the slogan that special districts are special. Special districts are not general government. They are formed to perform a special function. And for the last 22 years, Proposition 218 has made special districts even more special. The funds that are collected from the ratepayers have to be justified as providing that function that is being provided to the ratepayers, not to the general public. And while helping the homeless is obviously a very noble thing to do, and this is obviously the morally correct thing that this government needs to do, I'm not sure that it fits at all with the purposes of a special district. You have two sources of money from which the contribution could come, the wastewater fund or your solid waste fund. Both of those in your operations code have a section that defines the purposes for which those monies are being collected, and I believe in the Proposition 218 notice, the ratepayers were probably told what the money was being collected for so that they could consider whether it was a reasonable amount to pay or not. Specifically, I would urge you to look at Section 606.02 of the Operations Code, which lays out why the money is being collected and what it can be spent on. And I don't think you will find providing public restrooms to be among those functions. Additionally, while helping the homeless and homelessness in general is clearly a regional, and in fact it's a national issue, as we've heard, Costa Mesa's reaction to this with the 50 people is a response to a court order. So it's a city of Costa Mesa problem, and in authorizing these funds, you would be asking people who are not in Costa Mesa to be paying to solve a Costa Mesa problem. I think there's an issue with that also. And while I live in a different city, I wanted to point out to you that in the rest of the city where I live, the sewer service in the part that's not served by this district and other special districts is served by the city of Newport Beach, the sewer infrastructure. That is, and people are similarly charged for the use of that. That is in what is called an enterprise fund, and the money collected from that has to be used for maintaining the sewer infrastructure. I cannot conceive in Newport Beach that the enterprise fund, which is the equivalent of the money you have available to you, would ever be asked to pay for public restrooms in a park, in a library, anywhere. So in summary, this seems to me to be a general government obligation. The city should be paying for it. The county should be paying for it. But I cannot see providing public restrooms or public sanitation in general as something that the ratepayers of the special district were told their rates are being paid for. And you could broaden this. If the logic of this was correct, all sorts of other things, because they contribute to general sanitation, could be obligations the city would want to pass to you, but I don't think it's correct to do that. They could be asking you to pay for street sweeping, because that contributes to general sanitation. So I have a lot of trouble with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody from the public care to make a comment? Address the board? Would our legal advisor care to respond?
Sure. I think from the Prop 218 standpoint, first, the argument was interesting. It was good, shows a good understanding of Prop 218. I think, though, that because we're a sanitary agency and we're dealing directly with sanitary collection facilities, I think you can get over the Prop 218 issue. The issue that we saw was the permanent facilities that I think you could also make a justification for, but we want to keep sewage off the streets in the same way that we send a Vector truck out when there's a sewage spill. In this case, what we're doing is placing additional collection facilities to make sure that persons don't use the streets for the wrong purpose. So I do believe this goes to our Prop 218 purposes, and I don't think the discussion about the street sweeper, all the good, going along with an excellent legal analysis, I think the street sweeper is one step removed from actually placing sanitary facilities by a sanitary district.
Art, I'd like to make approval for action 1 only. Not, we can talk about action 2 at the board meeting for the $50,000. That's my motion.
Second.
Discussion. Yeah, Art, I agree. We had already, as a board, committed to the $25,000 for the poor. I think this board, through President Ferryman, showed some leadership in coming forward with what we did originally. I know there was some bad feelings, and even the business community had kind of said they didn't want this because they didn't want the portables moving around. The fact that it's going to a permanent location, I think, is a win. I really do. To increase our original commitment by another 25,000, I'm okay with that. The second part of the recommendation going forward with the 50,000 on an annual, I want some more discussion on that. I'm still a little unclear about the legal opinion about it being a hardwired surface, if you will. So I'll support the motion. I think going forward with the 50,000, if you look at our mission statement, it talks about the public safety, and to me this directly affects public safety. I do not want to read about sanitary issues like the city of San Diego had, and if we can have a part, again, back to what Jim started over a year ago with this idea of helping the homeless, so I'm vigorously going to support the motion.
John had something to do with that, too.
Yeah, but you're my mentor, so I have to kind of follow you along a little bit, Jimmy. So.
Okay, well, there's been a motion, and any other discussion?
Just to make sure that the motion only includes component one, the 50,000 for the temporary, and the second part of it we're going to continue. Okay.
I think clarification, the alternative actions or the recommended actions, okay, so we're talking about
Action one.
okay.
Action one.
The
Just-
alternative actions are not what we're discussing.
No.
Okay, everybody understand what we're voting on? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for
Thanks for coming
sharing
today.
with us.
I'm glad you came. Gives a better understanding.
Okay, let's move along. Organics tonnage report.
Excuse me, Mr. President. Actually, we got to go to item number 2, which is the February 2019 Code Enforcement Officer report. And unfortunately, our Code Enforcement Officer, Ed Roberts, had to go home due to illness. So I can do my best to try to answer the questions, or what we could do is just bring this back next month and talk about it.
Okay, yeah. We'll look for that next month.
Okay.
Solid waste diversion.
So again, go back to the item number 3, Mr. President. Organics tonnage is actually item number 3 and 4. Organics tonnage report and solid waste diversion report. Those are just our standard reports, and available to answer any questions you may have.
Jim, I forgot something on item number 2.
Yes.
For the code enforcement report. I had a resident in my neighborhood call me about an ongoing issue that she had been working with Ed on, and I just want to thank Scott and Ed for. She called me again yesterday. Cheryl called me again yesterday, and she's as happy as anybody can be. She really appreciated. We did some enforcement, and I just want to publicly thank Scott, and you can pass that on to Ed, that she is really, really happy about what you guys did.
Thank you.
Can you explain that real quickly?
She had a couple of neighbors that kept their cans out, and Cheryl had been working with Ed for months to try to get these people, and typically we take a pretty softball approach to people leaving their cans out. Well, apparently we put yellow tags on their cans, and they've been gone. It's been taken care of. So just taking that little more firm step helped alleviate her concerns. And so
Can you tell me basically what area you're talking about?
on New Hampshire.
Sounds good. State streets.
Okay, we're done with the solid waste report. Review ordinance 124.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. This is just for review only. Do not take action today. This proposed ordinance will be presented tomorrow night to the Citizens Advisory Committee. We'll get their recommendation, and we'll bring this back to you at the end of March 28th for consideration. Basically, the proposed ordinance number 124, if approved, would give the general manager authority to refund overpayments of anything less than $5,000, and it'll also give the general manager authority to dispose of surplus equipment or supplies of less than $5,000. Anything over $5,000 for the refund or the surplus of equipment and supplies would come to the board for approval. I do want to mention that you do have comments submitted to you last night from Mr. Mosier, and Mr. Mosier does make some suggestions how to reword ordinance number 124. Myself and District Council Burns has reviewed those changes, and we have no issues with them. So if you want to direct staff to make the changes as per Mr. Mosier's recommendations, we will do that and bring that back to you on March 28th.
Everybody good with that?
Let me ask Scott, disposal of excess equipment. I think there's some legal requirements. Well, two things. Well, I want to better understand the legal requirements for disposal of excess equipment, and I think the state has some laws. And two, I would like a report each month, if you get this authority, on what was disposed of and how, and what you use, and who you were requested a rebate of funds, and who they are and what the amount was. So if this authority is granted, I would just like a report as you take these kinds of actions, so that one, the public will know, and two, the board will know, what you did.
Would that be a consent calendar report?
Yeah, just something in there so that the public and the board can
Yeah.
see what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Just like earlier this year, the board directed me to give you monthly reports of the contracts I signed. We put that in a consent calendar. Same thing.
Yeah.
We put it in a
That way
consent.
it's at least available. Great.
So I'm sorry, just for clarification, Mr. Vice President. So I got your second item. You want a report submitted to you on a monthly basis, but the first one you wanted some more legal.
As I remember, Orange County Sand District struggled with. They struggled with this question, and they came to the conclusion that it should always go to auction. And I cannot remember why. We couldn't give away a simple computer to a school. There were some legal constraints about disposal of the equipment. I'd like to better understand that, maybe,
Just
when
a
we
gift of
look at
public
that,
funds.
look at this at the board meeting.
Gift of public funds would be,
Yeah, and basically just, if we give you the authority, it'd be an education for us and for staff.
Yes, I got it.
But then you just can't give it to anybody you want to. There's a process.
you got direction?
Yes, we will bring that back. Thank you. That's what we're looking for. So thank you. Thank you.
Item 6, ordinance 125, establishing regulations for district facilities.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Again, this is just for review only, no action today. Again, this ordinance will be presented to the Citizens Advisory Committee tomorrow night, and they'll make recommendations for the board's consideration. So what this ordinance does, if approved, it will give the general manager authority to schedule the operational hours of headquarters in the yard. As you might recall, in the previous years, I would come to the board requesting approval to close HQ early the day before Christmas or at noon before Thanksgiving. The board directed me to bring this back as an ordinance, so you don't have to consider this every year. So that's what you have before you today. Also, this ordinance talks about also establishes restrictions onto district properties. And the reason we want to do that is because there are people out there that go around and videotape public facilities. They think they have, which they do. They have a constitutional right to videotape public properties. So basically, someone can come on our parking lot, go in our lobby, and start videotaping it. It's fine. It's legal. The issue is the yard. The yard is really not meant for public access. And so while they can videotape the yard from the sidewalk, we don't want them going inside the yard. So by adopting this ordinance, we could put signage outside our wall, exterior wall of the yard, saying restricted area. We put the code in, and if they do go in there, then it's a violation, and it's a misdemeanor, so they can get arrested for that. So that's why we want something like this adopted, so we can make the yard restricted.
Has that happened in the past?
No, it hasn't, but we've seen videos of people going on district properties before, and so we want to prevent that.
I will tell you, Art, that my son has been on YouTube several times. There are organizations out there that go onto public government agencies to videotape, and they've gone into the Irvine Police Department in areas they shouldn't go, and
That's good.
I like the idea. It'd be horrible if someone were wandering around our yard and get hurt a piece of equipment or something. So I like the idea.
So will that be on our agenda for approval?
Yeah, so we'll take that back on March 28th. I also want to mention to the board that Mr. Mosier submitted comments regarding some small revisions to ordinance number 125. Again, myself and district council don't have any issues with these recommendations. If the board's okay with that, we'll make these changes and present it to you at the March 28th board meeting.
Is there anything significant that we would be concerned about in what he's proposing?
No, no, we don't. We don't have anything concerned.
Bob?
Scott, in the past, I think what you've done is, if staff wanted time off, or permanent closure of the facilities, say at lunchtime before Thanksgiving, staff has to use their vacation or whatever.
Correct.
And then that still is your understanding of it.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, anything else on that? We'll put that on the agenda for next meeting. Solid waste rate study.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nabila Guzman will be giving us report.
I have a presentation, so Gina. Good morning, President Ferryman and members of the board. I will give a quick presentation, so just a reminder of the two options presented.
Maybe just speak closer to it.
Okay, so I'll,
Coffee time out here, I just want
I didn't know.
again, it'll be a brief presentation, just a reminder of the two options presented, and then I'm available for any questions. So why do we need a rate increase? The district has the goal of always having at least $2 million in reserves. I'm sorry, some technical difficulties. So property taxes are paid twice a year, which is how the district receives its revenue. The $2 million in reserves help pay the invoices during the months when no money is received. That is during June and October. The organics program. The district has been subsidizing the organics program with its reserves since the implementation in 2015. And in 2014, when town hall meetings were provided to the residents, they were advised to expect at least a $2 monthly increase to cover the program cost. And lastly, per our new CRNR contract, CRNR can submit an annual CPI increase request. The first one will be this year, so if a CPI is granted, that will also mean that we need more money. The first recommended option is based on the Citizens Advisory Committee feedback received during their meeting in January. This is a one-time rate increase in July 2019 of 10.83%. It would raise the rates by $1.95 a month for a monthly rate of $19.95, and it would be an annual rate of $239.40, which was the rate during 2005 and through 2011. This rate would be from July 2019 through June 2021 at which time another rate study would be needed to know what the rates for future years would be. During this time, the district would acquire a new billing system and verify card size data to then implement a tier rate system. So that would be like any other utility. Those residents throwing away more solid waste would pay more than the residents disposing of less. The recommended option, if adopted, CMSD will still be operating at a deficit, but this option does bring in around $600,000 in revenue needed, which will reduce our deficit. And again, this option, if adopted, is only for 2 years. Future rates to decrease the deficit, to eliminate the deficit, would be unknown. Another rate study and rates would be need to be adopted by fiscal year 21-22. Otherwise, as you can see on the chart above, our reserve levels drop below $2 million in fiscal year 22-23. So again, we would need another rate study done to figure out what those rates for a tier rate system would be. The alternative option is a flat rate increase for all card sizes, which is the current system that we have now. It would be a flat increase across the board. It's a 33% increase over the next 5 years, and it does eliminate our deficit. So our rates for the first year, starting July 1st, 2019, would jump from $18 a month to $18.74. By fiscal year 23-24, rates would be $24.10. And again, that would mean that residents can still get up to 4 cards. It would be the same programs. And as you can see, the first 3 years, it's a 7% increase, and the last 2 years, it's a 6% increase. This is a rate comparison with other cities in Orange County. Our current rate is in gray at $18 a month. And the proposed rates for the one-time increase of $19.95 puts us in the orange. So we're still quite right in the middle. And the board has a policy of being within 10% of the net to hauler rate and average. So that is the only city that is not in there are Newport Beach and Laguna Woods.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What if out of all the cities on that chart, how many of them don't have the organics pickup?
The only cities that do have an organics program currently are Stanton, San Clemente,
San Juan Capistrano,
and San Juan Capistrano. I think those are the only 3, and those are also 3 that have.
That's going to have a significant impact on
Yes.
the new chart when it becomes reality that they've got to comply with the state law.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're going to be much farther to. Once I agree with you, Jim. We're going to be much farther to the left after all those other cities start complying.
Right, with SB 1383 in 2020 being active, these cities are hopefully will have a rate increase, a huge rate increase if they don't have a program already in place. Again, there's only 3 cities in Orange County that currently have an organics program, so these cities will experience a rate increase with their hauler that will need to be passed down to the ratepayers. So again, this is as of last month, and a lot of these cities are in negotiations or starting negotiations to implement an organics program, so the rates will be changing in the next few months, I imagine. This is just a chart of revenue requirements. Our revenue requirement is in blue. Revenue under our existing rates of $216 a year is the black line. Revenue under the proposed rates of a one-time increase to $19.95 is the green dots. And revenue under the alternative rate of the 5-year rate increase is the gray dashes. So as you can see, the alternative option number 2 is a 5-year rate increase that does eliminate our deficit in 5 years. The one-time increase is just giving staff time to implement a tier rate system. And as you can see, our revenue now does not cover our cost. This item went back to the Citizens Advisory Committee earlier this month, and they are recommending the board adopt option number 2 of the 5-year rate increase. They believe there are too many unknowns with option 1, and option 2 saves the district about $100,000. It is important to know that we had 3 members missing during the meeting, so the vote was 4-3 and 1 abstention. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions?
Mr. President, if I could just thank you, Nabila, for that presentation. So the staff has there's 4 recommendations before you tonight. The first one is to accept the solid waste rate study by NBS Government Finance Group. And the second recommendation is to select one of the 2 options identified in that study. And the third recommendation is to direct staff to prepare a mail Proposition 218 notice to all CMSD property owners receiving solid waste collection services, which is at least 45 days prior to the scheduled public hearing, and then schedule that public hearing, which the fourth recommendation is schedule that public hearing on May 23rd, 2019 to consider adopting the new solid waste rates.
Comments or motion?
No, a couple questions. Embedded in the report are 2 things that I need some help with. Back on that chart where you show the biggest chart you've got, there's a significant jump in expenses for next year. That one. We're presently running about $500,000 a year deficit, and it jumps up to $911,000. So it's
that is if we don't adopt a rate increase.
that is if what?
If we don't adopt a rate increase. So the line you're looking at is the annual surplus deficit without a rate increase. If option 1 is adopted, if you look to the second to the bottom line, it says annual surplus deficit with a rate increase. So if option 1 is adopted of 1995, our deficit would be 232.
I agree with your analysis. My question is what programmatic and O&M costs are driving that to go from $500,000 a year that has been the case since we instituted the organics program to $911,000?
It is the consultant projected a CPI increase every year for CRNR, and also a 5% increase for programs. So like this year, our Sharps and pharmaceutical had a 5% increase. Our educational programs also had an increase. So we are just projecting that those increases will continue for all of our programs.
So the whole budget for solid waste is about $6 million a year. So if you take the 3% CIP increase, that's $160,000 of that, about $400,000 increase. 5% of the programs, we're talking about $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 programs, and 5% of those programs that increase, they don't mean anything. I mean, it's insignificant in comparison to CRNR's potential request to the board to increase the CIP by 3%. So the whole program is increased by 3%. It only makes up $160,000 of that. We've been going along in $500,000 a year deficit. I still don't understand where that $400,000 come from, except maybe the 160, which is the board's discretion whether they give it to CRNR or not. If we don't give it to them, I would still expect it to be a $500,000 increase. So then what the consultant has done is they've taken that $900,000 and they've just increased it. What I'd like to see is, and I looked through the report in detail, I'd like to see how the consultant came up with that $911,000. I read I understand the CRNR potential increase, which may or may not happen, And they do, and staff, there will be some increases in staff and there will be some increases in programs, but they're minuscule. And I need an explanation for why that went to $911,000. Embedded in this report is a recommendation that we make a policy change from our present 30% dry period reserves to 35%. I'm real uncomfortable getting close to that 35%, which is the $2.1 million figure, without an increase, relatively quickly. So my recommendation would be, we'd go increase the $1.95, which takes us back to 2006 levels, and we were there for 5 years, and then we gave some of that reserves back because we were building reserves too quickly, and then have another increase, to keep us from getting down to that $2.1 million in 2021, which the next chart shows. I think it's not prudent to be that close to the edge with some other potential increases. So that would be my ultimate recommendation. I don't know if the board will support that, but anyway, I need to know why we'll go along $500,000 a year for many years since the organics program came into view, since we adopted it 4 or 5 years ago, and then why there's such a significant increase. And I expect it's very conservative analysis by the consultant. I just want to see what O&M and program and CNR, how that's made up.
Would anybody like to address that?
Well, we can get that information for Vice President Uten. We still recommend that the board adopts one of the two options to bring back, because, as you know, as a Prop 218, when we do a Prop 218 hearing, you've got to back up the data. You got to back. Here's the rate we're going to charge, and you got to back up supporting documentation why you're going to increase that. The study does that. We can get that information from Vice President Uten prior to May 23rd, why that increase from 463 to 911. But to go and change the rate from 2021 different than what's on the study, I think we'd have some Prop 218 issues, if I'm not mistaken, because, like I said, you got to have a backup information to demonstrate to the public why you're increasing those rates. This study does that. So if you change it to different, we can't do that. Another issue is we're coming down the timeline. We have 45 days to issue a public notice. That means we have to get that notice out by April 4th. And so to meet that 45-day notice for May. Now, I guess we could have the public hearing in June, which is the same time when you adopt the budget. So I guess there might be some little wiggle room, but not much time is left. So just want to leave that out there for the board.
Art, did you have a comment?
Yes. I'm opposed to the 1-year increase. I would rather go with the 5-year rate increase based on the flat rate, because we don't know if we're going to get
option number 2. You're recommending option
number 2. Okay. That's what I'm recommending. And we don't know if we're going to get any CIP increases from CR&R. They haven't given us one in 13 years or so. And even though they may give us a couple, we can always say no. So and we can always delete the percentage that we're going to charge per year based on CIP if they don't offer it to us. So we can delete that to the public down the road if we don't want to. Sure. Even though we have a 5-year increase, doesn't mean we have to stay with that the last couple of years.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
It gives us more flexibility, but that's where I'm coming from. I don't really like the 1-year increase. I'd rather have, because we could legally go 5 years. I think that's a smarter way to go for us right now. That way that meets our criteria for the deadlines.
Sure.
And then we approve the mailing out of the information to the citizens.
Mr. President, Board Director, District Treasurer Mark Davis told me he can answer Vice President Uten's question regarding the increase. So,
Mark?
Thanks, Scott, Mr. President. So the increases on the expense side of the house are they vary by category. And for purposes of putting together the study and just walking down the categories, salaries and benefits are estimated to increase 5% per year. And that's really based upon people normally moving through the ranges and their steps that they would do. And it really doesn't even take into account any kind of COLA that may go into play that the staff could be eligible for. The trash hauler increases, as mentioned, are really conservative for purposes of putting this together, in that we do believe it's going to be CR&R's intention to come to you every other year with a request for a CPI increase. And so these numbers got based upon the existing CPI increase, which is about 3.6%, that would go into play in that first 1920 fiscal year, and then every other year thereafter. In the off years, we do anticipate that the trash hauler rates will increase by about 1%, and that's really just due to occupancy count that may change in any given year. So we do expect those to go up even in years that the trash hauler would not request an increase. The recycling, disposal, and the organics is really based upon prior experience in growing. The organics did have a very slow start in what our expenses were, and we're seeing that ramp up now, and that's reflected in these outlier years. O&M and the program's increase are based upon projected increases of 5% year over year as we move through these years. So on the revenue side of the house is not increasing as much as the expenditures are increasing, and that's why you're seeing that gap get wider and wider each year. On the revenue side of the house, the property tax number, which is going to really be part of the other revenue amount. This is, we get a little bit of share of property tax each year. So for purposes of this, we put in a flat 2% increase to kind of coincide with Prop 13, that our property tax rate will grow each year. The rate revenue is just purely based upon what the existing rate revenue is going to be, or what it currently is on this particular projection. Then interest income is going to go down every year as we spend down the cash, and the cash available to invest gets smaller and smaller each year. We're going to see those that interest earnings get smaller and smaller each given year. So it's really a combination. When you look at why is the annual surplus deficit growing, it's growing because expenses are growing at a faster rate than the revenue, and that was a conscious decision made when the board cut rates back several years ago. And then the revenue will decrease, like I said, with the less funds available to invest on the investment earnings side. Does that help a little bit?
Basically, I can go through that chart and see where the costs are increasing.
Correct.
Can I ask a question? How do you anticipate only every other year for the CIP increase for CR&R?
Per the agreement that was just entered into with CR&R, they have the ability to be able to request a CPI increase from you every other year.
I didn't know that.
And so we're factoring in that's worst case scenario, that they would ask for that, and so we put it into this model so you could see worst
Is that
case.
based on every other year increase?
Yes, it is.
And just a reminder, it's based on your approval. You have to
I know,
approve that.
that's
So,
why.
but we're assuming you're going to approve it, but you don't
I
have
thought
to.
they could come back every year. but we
Yes,
could
it's
probably-
every other year for a 2-year increase, because our budget's made on the 2. Yes, so they can come back. They'll come this June or this May with a CPI increase for a CPI increase for fiscal year 1920 and 2021.
Because I've never heard that before, but thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike?
We've gone through these several times, and sometimes things get a little hazy. Which option keeps us from counting the carts?
Option 2,
The alternative, the flat.
the flat rate.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
We're not equipped to do that anyway.
It
It would take us a year or two to get.
I appreciate the work Nabila's done and staff has done on the alternatives or the ways to count carts. I apologize, but it's unrealistic for us to go out and count carts. I know I don't put all my carts out every week. It depends on how much my wife throws away. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to count carts. Give everybody the same thing and leave it alone.
Yeah, just to remind, we just to refresh, we weren't going to count every cart. Our concern was the size. That's what we were just worried about.
No, I understand.
And we still think, you know, we probably want to bring it back in the budget. It's still probably good for our records and for GIS to make sure, okay, which house, what size carts they have. I think that's good to have that information.
And I think, no, I don't think. I agree with you wholeheartedly. We need to know what's out there. But for us to spend $134,000 or whatever it was, I think our hauler should participate.
No, that correction,
the $100,000. It was we were budgeting $60,000 for a new billing system, but since then staff has explored other options that might cost less. It was $40,000 for another rate study, and then $40,000 for a 2-week count.
It's still more money than I want to spend, no matter if it's. I think our haulers should participate in letting us know what carts are out there. If they're going to ask for a CPI increase, it's kind of like with the restrooms earlier. Now that we've approved the restrooms, I think the city's going to need to help us in some areas, hopefully, that we need help with. Same with our hauler. If we're going to get more finite and decide how many carts we have, they need to let us know how many carts we have. That's just my humble opinion.
Actually, it just happens to be that, you know, there's two options here, one based on tiered rates and one not.
Yeah.
Either way, we can increase the rates. I think that we've made the decision that we don't want to go to a tiered rate system.
Right.
And whether or not the staff can convince us, you know, to go out and figure out how to figure out where those carts are, that's another decision. But the rate increases are really either one is available. It just happens to be that the $1.95 was based on the tiered rate processes.
And if we go to the flat rate system, Nabila, you had mentioned that if we go to the $19.95 a month, that in 2 years we're going to have to spend money to do another rate study.
Yes. Option number 1 is just to buy the district time. So as you can see in the chart, we are already operating at a deficit. If we don't do a rate increase, we will run out of, I think, drop below the $2 million by next fiscal year. So we needed a one-time rate increase to help us help the district buy time and implement the new billing system, count the carts, and do a new rate study.
But the alternative one gets us on the path to erasing that deficit at the end of the 5 years. We don't have to pay for any more rate studies until 5 years from now.
Yes. So option number 2 is on the screen right now. That does eliminate the deficit in 5 years. And the Appendix A on your staff report gives you the 10-year forecast of where we'll be in 10 years with this 5-year rate increase.
Okay. I think that kind of aligns with what you were saying, Art, doesn't it? Okay. Are we looking for
Jim, would you
motions?
like to say a few words?
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, President Fairman. To Vice President Uten's puzzle, on the slide that was up here for a long time, the biggest contribution to the step change in the deficit was the line under, it said other revenue, and it was projecting the number to be $190,000 for the next 5 years. But that number is $130,000 less than it looks like it was historically. This year it's in the $300,000, and then it's very, very steady for 5 years at a much lower number, 100. And just skimming through the report, it was not immediately obvious what other revenue means. So I was wondering if there could be an explanation of what other revenue, what other revenue is, and why it is suddenly changing and then being very steady.
Mr. President, I'd be happy to take a stab at that.
Conversation here or not, but
Well, I want to.
The other revenue amounts consist of a few different items. Some of those include the property tax revenue that we had talked about previously, and the large increase that we saw in 17-18 and 18-19 are really, if we look at that just in and of itself, and then go to 1920, we see the drop off in 1920. It's skewed just a little bit in those couple fiscal years with growth within the city and more properties coming online and more increase in property tax. The beginning in 1920, we're showing a more normal, or the projection is a more normalized back to what other revenue has traditionally been in years prior to those little blips that we're seeing, and then we're seeing a standard growth. So if we did a look back prior to that 17-18 fiscal year, you'll see that the other revenue amount is kind of in line with those what we're seeing in growth projected from 1920 through 23-24. It was just a blip. It's Mr. Mosier's correct. There's a big drop off there, but it's an anomaly in those couple fiscal years.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
You looking for a motion, Jim?
Mr. President?
You did?
Yes.
I'm sorry if I could interject just a couple more times. On the alternative one, the multiple rate increases, I just want to make clear that it's not a 7% increase in the first year, as the one consultant slide indicates. It's only a 4.1% increase in year one, 7% in year 2 and 3, 6% in years 4 and 5. And the staff report correctly identifies it at 4.1%, but the consultant study, when they were putting that together, it looked at total revenue increase, which included other revenues within that. So if you go that route, the percent increase to the public would only be 4.1% that first year, 7 in 2 and 3, 6 in 4 and 5.
Over a 5-year period, about a 5.5. If my quick math, you're better at it than I am.
Right. Yes.
5.5
over
per year average.
That would be about average, correct?
That's compounded, so I don't know about the 5.5. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just
yeah,
because I know we're going to get questions, and to me, that's the easiest way to look at it.
We have a motion.
Arlene got a second, I think, too.
That's for the option, the flat rate option.
Mr. President, Board, could you go all 4 items, take action on all 4 items separately on the recommendation? Can you take action on?
Beg your pardon?
Take all. There's 4 recommendations. Can you take them one by one as far as action?
Why don't you read off option?
So the first recommendation: accept solid waste rate study by NBS Government Finance Group.
Move for approval.
Second.
Should we take them in?
Yes, please.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Number 2, what select one of the 2 options identified in the study. Which
We did that.
option number 2? So we need action. So you're gonna recommend option number 2. So you took action on that?
We did vote on that.
Yeah, when you vote on that. Was there a second?
The only option we're going to do is ultimately say this is the direction we're going to go to have a public hearing.
Right.
Public hearing, then you're going to
Yeah,
decide
yeah,
whether you
exactly.
actually want to go
Exactly.
with that rate. So
Exactly.
we almost,
We just approved it.
this is almost a recommendation, not exactly a hard action, tell us to do anything. The whole thing is going to be decided once we do the notice public hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
What do you want me to do here?
We've already approved that movement to option 2.
But I don't think we voted on it because we got it into discussion. Did we?
Yeah, we voted.
First item.
She's
Did
saying
we?
no.
Okay, we didn't vote on that.
Second item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
No. It does carry, but I vote no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Item 3.
What's item 3, Scott?
So you're going to direct staff to prepare a mail proposition 218 notice to all CMSD property owners receiving solid waste collection services at least 45 days prior to the scheduled public hearing.
I'll move that action.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And 4.
We're going to schedule a public hearing on May 23rd, 2019 to consider adopting new solid waste rates.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
I voted aye. I just didn't enunciate. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's move along to CalPERS, optional membership.
Thank you, Mr. President. Diana Bodrowski is going to give this report.
Good morning, President and Board. Excuse me, at your request, staff has prepared this report. The Board of Directors, as you know, has the option of electing optional membership into CalPERS, the district's retirement system for employees. To date, none of the board members have opted for membership. Membership is on an individual basis. Not all of the board has to elect membership in order for one member to participate. With the exception of Vice President Uten, who in 2015 voluntarily chose not to increase his pay rate, the cost to a board member would be at the rate of 6.5% per payroll, and that cost would be $1,380.60 annually for the board member, and the same cost to the district. For Vice President Uten's optional membership, his rate would be at the rate also of 6.5% per payroll, and that amount would be $1,034.28 annually for Vice President Uten and for the district. One important note to make is that if optional membership is elected, it is irrevocable. There's no government code provision to allow for the cancellation of membership prior to separation from the elected position. So staff is requesting direction from the board on this matter.
What questions, Jim?
Mike?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this back to us. So it'd be $115.05 per month contribution per member.
Right, because
except for Director or Vice President Uten. What if I only make 4 meetings that month?
it depends on what your payroll, what your amount is.
Okay, so
You have the maximum 6 meetings that you're eligible for.
So if I only go to 4 meetings, the contribution by myself and by the district would be less.
Right, 6.5% of your earnings.
Okay. Are there any restrictions on other retirement plans that would preclude a director from, or any employee from being able to participate? In other words, if I get Social Security benefits, which I don't, but if I did, would that affect the ability to participate in the CalPERS program?
In this, I would have to look into what, if any, restrictions, but none that in the CalPERS optional member guide did not address any of that.
If you don't mind, I would appreciate
Okay.
knowing that. The other thing is, we are strictly employees of the Costa Mesa Sanitary District. The fact that I'm a self-employed person in my own occupation, I'd also like to know if there's anything with my occupation that would preclude me from being able to be a member. I don't believe there is, but can you check on that as well?
Okay, you let me know what your retirement system is, or you have no retirement system. To my knowledge, there would not be a conflict.
Okay, I need to check with my company as well. We don't get retirement. We get something called termination benefits. So I need to check with them as well.
Yes.
I'll let you know what Jim, I'm interested in doing this. Bob, I don't think you can.
I think I am too.
I mean, when did board members become eligible? I always thought we were not, but apparently we have been eligible.
There's optional membership.
Okay.
Yes, you are eligible
Because
as
we're
an elected
employee
official.
of the district, technically.
Yes.
Okay.
When you look into mine, I have the retirement system through CalSTRS.
Okay.
Teachers' retirement system. If there's any, problem with that.
Say something?
Yeah.
Arlene?
On mine, which I guess it's a problem because I'm CalPERS now. I've always been it because of the city. I had it. So do I opt out of that to get into CalPERS for
Good question.
the sanitary district?
Well, my understanding is that through the city, you were a member of PERS.
Yes.
When you ended that, when you were no longer an elected official with the city, that ended. You can't bring that to the district. You would have to opt in with the district.
What I'm
I don't, so
No, I think I'm sorry, Diana, but I think you can have multiple PERS accounts, from my understanding.
Yeah, it's just like I have PERS at Claremont. I still get Claremont PERS. You know, it's you don't get opt out. We'll double check it, but you'll be fine. You keep your City of Costa Mesa PERS, and then if you want to be in this program, you'd be in the district.
The counselors one, that should be the same philosophy, I would think, but I think it's good to check. I mean, all of the other retirement programs some of them have limits on what you can earn, so not that we earn a bunch of money here. I'm not saying that.
The Social Security question, I have OSERS, and OSERS allows, I also have Social Security. STRS by policy does not allow the teachers to have Social Security.
That's right.
So I think it'll be, it's a PERS policy probably that, and I don't have a clue. But I can tell you that I have Social Security by being in OSERS, and my wife cannot have Social Security.
Well, I knew, yeah.
Except she gets my Social Security.
You know the other occupation that can't get Social Security? Railroad workers.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Not that you would ever venture down that road, but
Teachers, too.
teachers and railroad workers don't get Social Security.
Well, you get Social Security, but they only 1/3 of what, instead of getting a full amount, you get 1/3, and that, usually I get like a check for $3 a month.
But you could be in Social Security and PERS.
I believe you can, yes.
But I'd like you to check that.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
I'd
if
like
we can
to.
get some clarification on how many board members are interested in this, and we'll do some more research and
Raise
bring it
your
back.
hand if you want to pursue this.
3? Okay.
I think you need to announce the names for public record.
So, I'm sorry. So it's Secretary Schaefer, Director Schaefer, and Director Perry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for finding this out.
Okay, let's move along. Closing items, oral communications, and director comments.
No, Mr. President, we have item number 9, and that's consider changing the date or canceling the April 9th study session. You have a conflict that day because all the board members are attending CSDA Special District Leadership Academy in San Diego from April 7th to the 10th. So staff is seeking some direction. Do you want to reschedule your April study session, or do you want to cancel it?
I'd like to reschedule to the 16th if we could. This is the following Tuesday.
I was reading the brochure, and the Wednesday session, is this the Wednesday?
Yeah, I've already, for the returnees, we're all returnees. It all ends on Tuesday, and I think we had all scheduled to stay Tuesday night.
I
And
don't mind the date you're choosing, but we'll all be done with the conference on
Tuesday afternoon. I agree with Art. I think we ought to move the study session to the 16th, especially with some of the stuff that's come up.
Yeah, we have to 16th, if that's okay with the staff.
This April?
Yeah, that's it's just a week later.
It's fine. 9:30?
Melanie, do you need to change our reservations? Or is that local?
San Diego.
What's happening on Wednesday?
That's the mayor's State of the Union address of the city.
Is that something we want to listen to?
Well, we should.
That's what I'm saying, we could,
It's in the evening on the 10th, right?
it's in the evening.
Or is it a luncheon or is it an evening?
It's an evening. I'm pretty sure.
Probably.
I bet the Fourth Estate would know. Do you know?
Let us know.
Fifth Estate. Did I say?
I'll stay.
You're the Fifth Estate.
Okay, so we're in agreement on the 16th study session, 9:30 a.m.
And how many people are going to Oakland?
Yeah, can we talk about that? I looked at the agenda, there's
under
only
oral
like one thing that I thought it might be interesting to go, because we're talking about trash and that, one of those items.
You know, I think as the ISDOC representative, Jim's for OCSD, I'd encourage you to go. Jeff from CRNR is going to be talking about Waste One.
That's what I saw.
And I think that's important for us to hear. And I think you'll get some benefit out of it. going to Oak Hawk. Parking is always tough there at that hotel, but
Put your hiking shoes on.
yeah.
We could go together if we had to.
Well, now we know how to go then. It's driving fast. But you know, last year they had it on homeless. That was the big thing.
I saw their agenda. I thought that Waste One was something that we could consider.
That's the program that we talked about that I'd given Gina the information on it, that I think with CR&R's participation, I think it'd be good for us to take a look at it.
I think I'll be going, but not just going that day, and then that's it.
I'm going.
I'm going.
So we're all going,
Do they serve lunch?
Breakfast and lunch, Bob.
it's all day.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll stay all day because some of the items don't affect us, but.
Bob, are you going? No? Okay, everybody's going with Bob.
And he'll probably change his mind, I'm sure. So.
Okay, any other oral communications or director comments? If not,
I'm sorry, just one real quick question. Scott, how did the meeting with the Republic people on the pump station? Republic pump station? Republic. President, I'm sorry.
We had one resident show up because it was raining, coming down.
One
pretty hard.
resident show up.
Yeah, one resident showed up. Then the homeowner we were going to have the meeting set up, he finally showed up about 2 hours later. But it was still a good meeting. We learned a lot. We especially saw where all the water, how much water comes down that street during the rain was significant. So we plan on sending out like a simulation drawing to the property owners showing where electrical control panel might be located if we want to put it in the cul-de-sac, and we'll get their feedback, and then we'll present it back to the board in April.
Okay. Surprise.
Is that location the one we talked about that?
In the middle of the street. That's in only one.
okay, nothing else? This meeting's adjourned.